This is the Architect Exam Podcast, the official podcast of the Young Architect Academy.
Hey, architects and future architects. Welcome back to the Architect Exam Podcast. Today, we're tackling a topic that might be just about as exciting as watching concrete cure, and that is business entities. But don't worry, by the end of this episode, you'll actually find this stuff pretty interesting, I promise. Business structures might not always be why you got into architecture, but understanding them is crucial for the ARE exam and throughout your career. Think of this podcast as the spinach smoothie of architecture knowledge. Not what you're craving, but exactly what you need. The ARE focuses on testing candidates' understanding of business structures as outlined in NCARB's exam objectives. These concepts often appear on the practice management division. So if you're studying for practice management, definitely listen in. So let me start with this topic today with a little story. This is something that happened to a friend of mine who's an incredible architect and very talented. She started her own small practice doing residential work, and her business was going really well. Business was booming, and she had an opportunity to partner up with another architect for a specific project, for a major, large commercial project. And she thought, why not? And everything was going really well. They did hit a point, though, where they had a disagreement on design, and it ended up getting a little heated. Words were exchanged and feelings were hurt, and they decided to dissolve their partnership. But here's the kicker. They actually never formally established what kind of business entity they were operating under as a partnership. So they just both assumed they were working together, but legally they actually didn't create a general document as to what their partnership was. It was just a partnership by default. And that became a problem because my friend ended up on the hook for some commitments that her partner had made to some consultants. And by dissolving the partnership, she had to pay her previous partner upwards of $45,000 to dissolve the partnership. This is when she called me to tell me the story. She was panicking. And all I could think was this would have been so different if they had established that they should form an LLC or an LLP together before starting on that huge commercial project. And that's why it's important that we listen in today about these business entities. And I want to break down all the entity types and what they do. Nobody really goes to architecture school dreaming about this type of stuff. We don't really think about liability protection and tax structures, right? We're more involved with design, but these can really save your job and your professional career. Michael always says that this is one of the topics that may seem boring, but until it becomes absolutely important so you can protect yourself while working. During our last group of coaching in the ARE bootcamp, we actually surveyed the room and discovered that about 80% of candidates really never formally have learned about business structures when they were in architecture school. It's not surprising. These topics often get cast aside and pushed aside because, studio and design work always seem to take the precedent. So before we dive in, I just want to let you know that we did create a 2-page PDF for this information to add to your study notes. I'm going to essentially give you a bunch of information today, but now this PDF is kind of a handy little guide that condenses all that information into 2 pages. So it's an easy reference guide to carry around with you. You can download it at youngarchitect.com/business. It's like having a little pocket guide for business structures just to carry with you so that you can reference it for some of the legal jargon and some of the confusing tax terminology that I'm going to mention today. So let's dive into these business entity types. I like to think of business entities as types of buildings. Each has different features, different levels of protections, and different maintenance requirements. So let's explore some of these types. Let's start with the first one, which is a sole proprietorship. I like to call this type the studio apartment scale of business entities. A sole proprietorship is when it's just you doing your thing as a licensed architect, and there's no separation between your business life and your personal life. So legally speaking, you and your business are the same entity. Your name is your business. So imagine your business finances and your personal finances are roommates sharing this studio apartment, and there's no privacy, no curtain between you two. Whatever mess your business roommate makes, you're both living with that mess. So the benefits of a sole proprietorship are pretty straightforward. It's instant. There's no paperwork required to create it. You just start working with your name as your license. So you get your license as an architect, you get your stamp, and that is your business. All decisions are yours alone. All profits come directly to you, and there's minimal bureaucracy and administrative headaches. Sounds great, right? But there is a huge problem. There is unlimited personal liability, which means if you have a client and they sue you they sue your business, they're actually suing you personally. That means all of your personal assets like your house, your car, your savings account, even that wonderful vintage Eames chair that you splurged on, all of that is fair game in a lawsuit. This is why many architects may start as a sole proprietor in the beginning as they're licensed and starting their own business, but they don't stay that way for long. It's like designing a building with no structural support. It's fine until something goes catastrophically wrong. So for the ARE exam, as you prepare for it, remember that sole proprietorships are the easiest form as a business entity to start, but they offer zero liability protection. Understanding that distinction is very important for the exam. Next up is the limited liability company, or the LLC. I like to call this version of a business entity the loft conversion of building types. There's a little bit more protection with an LLC. An LLC is like installing a really good waterproof membrane between your business and your personal life. So when problems rain down on your business, your personal assets stay nice and dry. So here's why LLCs are so popular with architects. First, you get that magical limited liability protection, hence the name. Your personal assets are protected if the business gets sued. Second, they offer super flexible management structure. You can run the business yourself, or you can share the management with several partners, or you could even hire managers while just remaining a passive owner of the company. Third, with an LLC, there's great tax flexibility. You can be taxed as a sole proprietor, a partnership, or even an S corporation if it benefits you. And fourth, LLCs are less formal than a corporation. So that means fewer meetings, less paperwork, and fewer corporate formalities. I was talking to a tax attorney once at a holiday party last year. Yes, this is the kind of wild conversation that architects have at holiday parties. And the accountant said that he actually recommends LLCs for about 80% of the small to mid-range size architecture firm. Now, an important note as you prepare for the ARE, while you're studying, remember that LLCs are not complicated to form. According to NCARB's content outlines, understanding formation requirements for each entity type is an important knowledge area.
You're listening to the Architect Exam Podcast, your guide to passing the ARE.
Next up in our business entity types are limited liability partnerships, or LLPs. Think of this as the townhouse of business entity types, so it's leveling up that much more. An LLP is kind of like a row of townhouses with really good party walls. Each partner has their own unit, so if one catches fires, the others are protected. LLPs are specifically designed for professional service firms like architecture practices. So each partner is, a licensed architect, and each partner is protected from the professional negligence of another partner that they may be partnered with in the LLP. However, everyone remains liable for their own professional mistakes. Partners share in management and profits, and just like an LLC, they get to enjoy pass-through taxation. Here's a key point many ARE candidates should know. In most states, LLPs are specifically for licensed professionals. That's why you'll sometimes see PLLP. That's a professional limited liability partnership. That's when you have a professional service that's being rendered. A classic LLP scenario is when there are several architects, each with different specialties, joining forces to create a company. Maybe one handles healthcare projects while another does residential projects, and maybe a third focuses on sustainable design. They want to share resources and join forces, but they don't want to share the liability of each other's work because it's so different. And finally, in the business entity types, we have corporations. This is the high-rise office tower of business entities. A corporation is like a massive mixed-use development project. It's complex to design and build, expensive to maintain, but extremely durable and capable of housing much larger operations. And there's two types of corporations you should know. First is the C corporation, which is the standard model. These provide complete separation between the business and the owners or the shareholders. They offer the strongest liability protection available. They have unlimited growth potential through stock issuance. However, they do require complex governance with boards, directors, officers, etc. And they do come with that pesky double taxation. The corporation pays tax on profits, then shareholders have to pay taxes again on dividends. Next is the S corporation, which is a modified version. They still have all the liability protection of a C corporation, but they offer pass-through taxation, which avoids that double taxation issue. They are usually limited to about 100 shareholders, and they must be generally U.S. citizens, residents, and they could only have one class of stock type. So C corporation is a little bit larger. S corporation is a scaled down version of that. I remember when I was studying for the ARE, I kept mixing up these entity types. This is when my study buddy in the ARE bootcamp helped me come up with this kind of neat little trick to remember all of this. So think about how many times you're taxed and how many people can come after your personal house if something goes wrong with your business. So that's really what it boils down to. Think of it in scales. Sole proprietorship is one taxation, but personally, everything's at risk. LLCs and LLPs are still one taxation, but your personal assets are protected. C corporations, there's double taxation, but you get the best protection. And then finally, S corporations, one taxation, best protection, but there is a lot more restrictions on growth and scale. So next, let's go over choosing the right entity type based on the scenario that you're given. So let's put this knowledge into practice with some scenarios that you may encounter in your career or especially on the exam. Scenario 1, solo practice. Imagine you're starting your own one-person architecture firm, just focusing on small residential projects. Here are your options. You could be a sole proprietorship, which would be easy to form, but risky with personal liability. Alternatively, you could be a single member LLC, which requires a little bit more paperwork up front, but gives you a lot better personal protection. And last, you could be an S corporation, which involves a lot more formalities, but offers potential tax benefits if you're earning a significant profit. For most solo architects just starting out, a single member LLC makes the most sense. That's actually what I have. That's what I did when I went out on my own. It's like wearing a helmet while you're biking. It might seem unnecessary starting out, but you will be really happy you have it if you need it. Next scenario is a small partnership. This is, again, kind of like my friend when she wanted to partner up with another architect. A small partnership, imagine you and 2 architect friends want to start a firm together. Sounds exciting. Your options are to first start a general partnership, which automatically you form by working together, but this is when you don't have any formal paperwork put in place yet. So you could start right away, but it's dangerous. Next, as an option, would be an LLP. That would work well if each of you will manage separate clients and projects, but still be working together under the same business. An LLC is also good if you plan to work collaboratively with your partners on projects. And then finally, an S corporation is also worth considering once you've established the profit margins and who does what. Most small architecture partnerships choose either an LLC or an LLP. The decision often comes down to how you plan to divide project responsibilities. And our last scenario here, let's consider growth and expansion. Imagine your firm is booming, business is going great, and it's growing rapidly. So you're considering bringing in outside investors and maybe eventually going public with your business. Your options would be to form a C corporation. It's really the only choice for significant outside investment or going public. Or you could try an LLC with multiple membership classes, which is possible for moderate growth while maintaining control of your business. I admit very few architecture firms reach this range, but the ones that do almost always convert to C corporations because they become so large. So next, let's talk specifically about how business entities relate to the ARE. According to NCARB's exam objectives, candidates should understand several key aspects about business entities. First, you'll need to understand liability protection. So which business entities protect your personal assets and which don't. Second, you will need to understand formation requirements. So what's needed to create each entity. Third, management structures, who can make decisions and why and to what scale. And fourth, tax implications. You'll need to understand pass-through versus corporate taxation with business entities. When preparing for the exam, focus on understanding business scenarios and which structure would be the most appropriate for different situations. So whether there's a scenario of a large project or small project or a very large architecture firm versus a small, maybe sole proprietor, be able to understand these scenarios and which entity best suits the scenario. But it is the most simple and it's common when people are just getting started out. So in a nutshell, when studying, remember that corporations offer the most liability protection, but they also have the most formalities and potential for double taxation. LLCs offer good protection with more flexibility. You'll see these a lot more often with architecture companies and architecture businesses. And lastly, sole proprietorships offer no protection against personal assets, but they are very simple to form, and a lot of companies start out this way before becoming LLCs or LLPs. Remember this important concept. When architects work together informally without putting the paperwork together and that formal business structure, kind of like my friend did, they likely have created a general partnership just by default, but that opens you up to a lot of unlimited personal liability. So be careful. Beyond the exam, here are some practical considerations as you think about your future practice if you're planning to go out on your own and start your own business. For new graduates, most new architects work for established firms, so you don't need to worry about business entities just yet, but understanding them helps you make sense of your own firm's structure and decision-making. For aspiring solo practitioners, an LLC is almost always your best starting point. The modest costs and paperwork are well worth the liability protection. For groups and partnerships for architects, have a business entity conversation early on. I can't stress this enough. So many architectural partnerships fracture because they didn't establish clear expectations and structures from day one. You know, kind of like how my friend and her partner ended up having differences in design opinions, and that actually fractured their partnership. Have these conversations before you partner up. And for all architects, remember that business entities are just one part of your risk management as a company. Professional liability insurance is equally important as to what type of business you're actually running. So understanding what type of insurance you should carry is equally important. So there you have it. Business entities demystified. So to quickly recap, that sole proprietorship business entity style are simple but offer no personal protection. LLCs provide good protection with flexibility, which makes them a popular choice for small firms. LLPs are designed for professional partnerships with separate projects, and corporations offer the most protection for businesses, but they come with a lot of complexity. Understanding these structures isn't just important for passing your AREs, it's important for protecting your career that you've worked so hard to build. Architecture isn't just an art or a science, it's also about running a business. And just like you wouldn't design a building without understanding its structural system, you really shouldn't be practicing architecture without understanding its business structure. So for those of you who are studying for the ARE, I've created this little free business entity cheat sheet, this little 2-pager that breaks down all this information I just gave you into a really easy reference guide. You can download it again at youngarchitect.com/business. And if you're finding the ARE very overwhelming, feel free to check out our ARE bootcamp where we break down these complex topics into manageable chunks and provide a structured approach to passing your exams. Thanks for listening. And remember, the right business entity is like good drainage. Nobody knows when it's not working properly, but everyone suffers when it's not. See you next time. Thanks for listening in.
Thanks for listening to the Architect Exam Podcast. Ready to take your studying to the next level? Visit our online ARE Architecture School website at academy.youngarchitect.com to learn more about how we can help you. See you next time.